Welcome to Let's Talk. Our session today is titled Out of School Time Programs in a Quality Improvement System. I'm Debbie Mathias from the BUILD Initiative and the director of the QRIS National Learning Network. Before we begin our session, I'd like to thank the Alliance for Early Success and other generous funders for making this learning community possible. We began this series for state quality administrators and leaders to support their essential work within states around early learning systems building. Quality administrators are welcome to invite other participants as related to the specific topic of the call, and we know several of you invited colleagues such as school-age specialists within the state and professional development and technical assistance leaders, 21st Century Community Learning Center leadership, statewide after-school networks and National After-School Association state affiliates, and National Child Care Organization state affiliates, for example, Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCAs. We have colleagues on the call from over 24 states and territories. We intentionally keep the session small to invite conversation and sharing. We hope these calls enable us to illuminate challenges, innovation, and promising practices. Make sure to keep track of your ideas, questions, and state examples for our talks throughout this session. Enter them in the chat box so we can discuss throughout the session. Today we'll explore strategies for creating a successful plan to incorporate out-of-school programs in quality improvement and systems. Thank you for taking the time to answer the questions when you registered. Many of you provided thoughtful ideas and suggestions. We reviewed the information and it's informing the presentation. Some interesting and not surprising comments included the relationship of licensing and out-of-school programs and participation in the QRIS, the challenges of recruiting and maintaining qualified staff, and exploring ways to increase the inclusion of children with disabilities in out-of-school time programs. I'm delighted to introduce our sparks for today to spark our conversation, give us some basic information, and then provide support for our discussion afterwards. Susan O'Connor is a Senior Training and Technical Assistance Specialist with the National Center on Afterschool and Summer Enrichment, better known as NCASE to us. She's currently working with the National Institute on Out-of-School Time on a coaching manual and has extensive experience in quality improvement after school and summer settings. Monica Logan's the Vice President of Program and System Quality at the National Summer Learning Association and a National Center on After-School and Summer Enrichment team member. Her role includes oversight for the ongoing development and delivery and the growth of NSLA's evaluation and assessment services, including the Summer Learning Program Quality Intervention. Well, we have a lot of great information to share today, so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Susan O'Connor to get us started. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Debbie. Thanks so much for that lovely introduction. And I'm joining you here today from Western Mass, where we are dearly hoping that yesterday's snowstorm was our last for the spring. And I'm very glad to be on this with my colleague, Monica, who can help us to really focus on the great importance of summer with the quality improvement efforts that we're involved in. So NCASE began in October of 2015 and is one of the technical assistance centers for the Office of Child Care, as Debbie said. Our goal is to broadly ensure that school-age children and families of low income have increased access to after-school and summer learning experiences that will contribute to their overall development and their academic achievement. And I want to just go over the session goal today and say that today's webinar is going to focus on exploring strategies for creating a successful plan for school-age quality improvement and quality rating and improvement systems. And in addition, we're going to be sharing some lessons learned about quality improvement system building from 23 states that participated last year in a peer learning community. And I've noticed that a number of the states that participated with us last year on that are again with us today. So as Debbie said, we're so appreciative that people took a few minutes to tell us what it is you need out of this session and why you're attending. And so in counting up the responses, and some states answered more than one thing, but 4 states said that you are already including out-of-school time in your QRIS system and you want to make some revisions. 6 states said that you have school age in your system but want to increase participation. 8 states said that you really want to include out-of-school time in your system. It is not yet included. You want to create a plan for that. And as Debbie said, people shared with us a number of key issues which are important to them to hear more about today. So when we ask you what lessons you have learned from developing your systems, you said quality improvement is an ongoing process. It's not one and done. It's just got to become part of the way of life in every organization. That stakeholder involvement and buy-in is critical to making sure that you're building a system that really is going to be responsive to out-of-school time, that we need to use language that responds to the field, that the field relates to, and that we need to be careful to provide supports at all levels, from the skilled leader all the way to that brand new staff person. The challenges are not going to surprise you. I found it interesting how many states keyed in on certain challenges, but these are challenges we've been hearing about for quite a long time in our field. Number one, the top vote getter was that it is challenging to meet the needs of varied models and approaches for school-age programs and the broad age range that we serve. So we all want to be inclusive of the field, and yet it can be so hard to agree just at the very beginning on quality standards, on program assessment tools, when the focus and the philosophy can vary so much between programs that are funded by CCDF subsidy, by the 21st century programs that are under the Department of Education, and by youth development organizations and summer programs. The next most frequently mentioned challenge was from 4 states who said that it's very hard to recruit and retain people into our mostly part-time workforce, especially when unemployment is low but salaries are low. So we're having a hard time competing for qualified workers. Then the turnover that we continue to have, which typically is around 40%, makes quality improvement and keeping up with professional development needs very hard. Other things mentioned, it's hard to find ways to financially support quality improvement and the system components like technical assistance. And it's also difficult because often in QRIS systems, the first level is a requirement to be licensed. And as you know, so many of our programs are license exempt. I wanted to just pause for a minute here to see if there were any other challenges or needs that you have as we get started. You can type in the chat if you'd like. And I'm going to just go over the agenda, and I'll keep an eye on the chat bar to see if anybody adds anything. As Debbie said, we're going to start really providing you just with a broad overview of after-school and summer quality improvement system issues. And then we're going to go into more of a sort of an interview format and time for all of you to talk. So the history of quality improvement in school age is rich and long. There have been initiatives really for 30 years plus, starting in 1991 when the National Institute on Out of School Time and the National After School Association developed draft standards and a program improvement process with a very forward-thinking focus on continuous quality improvement approach, a focus that is just trending again now. We conducted a pilot of improvement and accreditation system, and now the NAA standards and accreditation system, which began in 1998, are managed under the Council on Accreditation. Over the years, there's been a development of a number of other program assessment tools and processes, including the school age Child Environmental Rating Scale, SACRS, which is used by really the majority of states that have QRIS for school age. And we're going to talk more about other assessment tools in a minute. The National Summer Learning Association, Monica's organization, was founded at Johns Hopkins in 2001 and ensures now that we place equal focus on high-quality summer learning experiences. The Wallace Foundation has funded city system building in a number of cities, and I encourage you to check their website to see which cities have been involved, because it could be that there is a city in your state that has Wallace funding, and they often have a lot to share and have created a lot of the components of quality systems. We know of some states that say, oh, we need to create our quality standards, but they have learned that a city in their state has already done that, and they can build from that and borrow from it. We also just want to mention that 29 states have standards and 6 states are in the process of creating standards. Now that is data from our data profiles from 2014, so those numbers may have changed somewhat. So I just mentioned the National Data Profile. This is just hot off the press. And as you're looking at the profile, I just want to make sure that you know that every state also has its own profile, and every territory as well. These profiles present a detailed picture of how federal investments and state policies can support the needs of school-age children, who represent nearly half of all children served through CCDF subsidies. So what does this national data tell us about school age and QRIS? The most important thing is right in the center of that data profile page on the left, which says that 45% of children served with CCDF subsidy dollars are 5 to 12-year-olds, nearly half. So it's important to just think about that nearly half of the children served with CCDF dollars are school age. And so it's important to think about how your quality dollars are being spent, and are they equitable with school age. Also, keep in mind, as you're doing system planning, that 1.6 million children are being served, it's 1.1 million children are being served in 21st century community learning centers. When you work on developing a quality system, it's good to be working cross-sector, because really in CCDF programs are being served in 21st century community learning center programs, and especially are a place where middle school and high school kids are also being served. NCASE always supports cross-sector planning so that we can really tap the resources and the supports needed so we are responding to where the children are. So there are some states that are working on really trying to combine the CCDF money and the 21st century money in order to build a stronger system. School-age programs, as I mentioned, are eligible to participate in QRIS in 24 states and 2 territories. But even the states that have been including school-age providers, we know that the rate of participation is often significantly lower than it is for early childhood. And that is why one of the questions we asked you in the registration was how many of you have a system but really want to focus on increasing participation. Okay, I want to just take a quick minute to talk about the key elements of quality for out-of-school time. This is drawn from the research by Deborah Vandell, who's one of the premier researchers in out-of-school time. We rely on her research heavily. Let's start with ratios in group sizes. The research indicates this is one of the most important determinants of program quality. Caring for our children provides these guidelines that we should have ratios of 1 to 8 for 5-year-olds, 1 to 10 for 6 to 8-year-olds, 1 to 12 for 9 to 12-year-olds. And yet, in looking at what ratios are required in state licensing, only 3 states meet those caring for our children standards. 25 states actually are well beyond it, where they have ratios of 16 to 1 to 26 to 1. And on group sizes, only 23 states actually regulate group size. So that's another big issue around quality. It's important also to focus on a positive social emotional climate, clear program structure with rules, routines, and limits that really are going to ensure careful supervision, a safe, predictable environment, and also helps with reducing suspensions and expulsions, which are a very important effort for the federal government right now. We want to see an engaging and supportive learning environment, continuity and coordination with both the regular school day and with our families. We can be just such an important bridge in connecting the multiple worlds that our children live in. And then strong staff management and business practices and data collection and evaluation, so we're operating with good data-informed practice. So we have unique issues to address for out-of-school time programs, and probably our biggest challenge, as I mentioned earlier, is that most of our staff positions are part-time. Our turnover rate, as I said, averages around 40%. These part-time staff are often hourly employees that may be full-time college students or people who are holding down a second or third job to make ends meet. What does that mean for the daily life of an after-school program? They may arrive to us in the job with little formal education on youth development. They may not have enough time for participating in training or in quality improvement efforts. However, our strength is that we have a group of highly educated, full-time staff with long retention rates, and these people really form the leadership core for our field. They're often the anchors for all of our quality improvement efforts, and so what you work on in quality improvement in your states and territories really ought to focus a lot on supporting this leadership core that that is there, that stays, that drives things in our programs. We also just want to say we need to support the high number of license exempt programs in our field. Most school-based or school-run programs are exempt. In many states, so are the WISE, Boys and Girls Clubs, faith-based organizations. So we really need to talk about all of those programs and how we're going to really support their quality efforts. Engagement in learning. Research shows that interactions and instructional practices are the greatest predictors for quality. Because we're often working with children that are coming to us after a long and very structured school day, we set the strongest foundation for learning in after school through providing youth with a balanced program that allows time to relax, that allows time for physical activity, and then to really decide what we're going to do with the children by giving them some voice and choice in what they want to be learning and doing. After all, we can always embed what they want to, what they need to be learning, as long as we start with something that's going to engage them, excite them, and hold their interest in the program. If they need to improve literacy skills, for example, they can write and produce a play, given that arts-related programming shows fabulous outcomes. If they need to learn math, we can engage them in sports activities that will also track statistics. I think you get the idea. Staff can work to find out what children want to learn and do during conversations, through voting or surveys, and this way we can tap their deep engagement in activities. After all, what we know is that children after grade 3 begin to vote with their feet if their programs aren't engaging them, and we don't want to lose them to become children at home without supervision. School-age program standards, as I said, have already been developed in 31 states. Some states have chosen to create standards that encompass birth to school age, and sometimes these states have embedded standards specific to school age or exempted school age for certain constructs. So, for example, they may exempt the many after-school programs based in school facilities from standards on facilities because the schools just aren't going to be responding to making all those changes. Or on professional development, they may decide to prorate the requirements for professional development for the part-time after-school staff. Other states have chosen to create standards meant just for 5 to 13-year-olds. Some even incorporate youth all the way up to age 18. These standards often include differences on developmentally appropriate practices on things like supervision or curriculum. In working with states on cross-sector planning for quality systems, states who are thinking about developing quality standards have often learned that school-age standards have already been developed by state after-school networks, or as I said before, by city intermediaries. And they have been able to just adopt these in full or perhaps make adaptations. So be sure you're not recreating the wheel when there are existing standards in your state. And I'm about to pause for some questions, but I just want to go over a little bit of information about program assessment tools. This is based on a product brief developed by the Forum for Youth Investment back in 2009. And it provides an overview of 10 assessment tools that are all developed, which are based on research from the youth development field. The brief includes the metrics for each of these measurement tools, what the reliability and validity are for each of these tools. So I'm just going to highlight a few of the tools that are used most frequently. APT stands for Assessing Program Practices, which is developed by the National Institute on Out-of-School Time. It works for youth in grades K through 8 and can be used for both program improvement efforts as well as monitoring. The Policy Studies Institute developed an out-of-school time observation tool, which is meant primarily for evaluation. The Program Quality Self-Assessment tool developed by the New York State Network for Youth Services, which used to be called NISAN. SACRS, many of you are familiar with it. I also want to mention the YPQA, the Youth Program Quality Assessment tool, developed by the Weikert Center. And I encourage anybody that's wondering about what tools to use to take a look at this brief. So with that, I would just like to pause and say, see if there are questions. And I see there already is one. I'm going to have to start with Amy's and probably back up a little bit. So Amy is saying this slide is really helpful. Is there additional information on the school-age PQA? That's a tool we're considering for the revised Mass QRIS in conjunction with SACRS. To my knowledge, Amy, there isn't additional information beyond what is in this particular brief. The brief is included in the resources at the end of the PowerPoint, but all of these list their websites, and I would urge you to go on the website if you're thinking of using any of these tools, because almost all of them have updated their tools, added new measures, perhaps done some more testing on reliability and validity. So I would first read the 2009 brief and then go on the website for each of the tools. Courtney from Arizona said it.
Susan, can we put that brief also directly associated with the session? That might be helpful for people to really begin to dig in and get a link. So we'll go to the resource slide and pull that and actually send it out with the slide deck tomorrow when we send along. Does that sound like a good plan?
Sure thing. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you were moving to Arizona, who was saying that they've designed a tool themselves for quality improvement. I wonder if we could get a link to that tool from Arizona, and we can share that tool with everyone on the session today.
And I see, Debbie, that Courtney also added that the Arizona tool was tested for design and validity by a third-party expert, which is great to know. So having that link would be wonderful, Courtney. I also want to back up to say that Kathy from Ohio provided us a link for their center-based and family child care standards and a website for other resources.
And we're getting quite a few links to resources, and we just got one for the Arizona tool. So you'll want to check back up through the chat box, and we'll send out the list of websites when we forward the PowerPoint to everyone, okay?
Thanks, everyone. And with that, I would like to turn this over to Monica, who's going to talk to us a bit about summer quality.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Monica Logan. I'm with the NCASE team as well. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking today after Susan gave that great overview of what happens in the out-of-school time space with a specific emphasis on after school. I'd like to spend a little bit of time before we jump into the interview section talking about how to differentiate what happens in the summer space. There are many parallels to what happens in after school, and there also are differences about what happens in the summer. And so we wanted to start where it all begins. NSLA, the organization I work for, was a part of some of the seminal research that came out over 25 years ago that looked at this issue of summer learning loss. And we realized and found out that summer learning loss in elementary school accounts alone for about half of the achievement gap that we see for ninth grade students. And so again, we talk about often how summer is a time of great peril but great promise for young people. And so we want to emphasize the fact that there's so many rich opportunities that can be taken advantage of in the summer space, and it's just about being very intentional and thoughtful in how you use that time. Additionally, we know research suggests that having 3 to 4 consecutive summers of high-quality learning, beginning all the way back in pre-kindergarten, can get kids reading back on grade level by the 3rd grade. And so this means that by having those consecutive summers of high-quality experiences, young people are 4 times more likely to graduate from high school. And so it's really profound data that tells us that summer is a really important space for summer school systems, for out-of-school time systems. We also know that only 1 in 8 kids who qualify for free and reduced meals during the school year get access to them during the summer months. And so we know that the place where most kids get meals during the school year is at school. And so while many schools are not open or offering summer opportunities, therein those young people have less access to free and reduced high quality or nourishing meals. And again, as we were saying, there's a lot of profound research that says kids attending high quality programs regularly have been shown to improve attachment to school, motivation, self-esteem, leadership, and relationships with peers and adults. So we also know that there are some really important tips that folks should consider when strengthening summer access and quality. And so we also know that what's important is that cities and states map out where high-need neighborhoods are and summer program options are, additionally, to ensure that families with low incomes have access to high-quality programs. And so you may have parts of the city that have lots of programs, but then when you do a map of what's happening across a city or across a state, you may notice that there are parts of your jurisdiction, of your state, that really are in dire need of those high-quality programs. So we suggest doing a scan or finding out what's happening, getting that data to see what's really happening in your state. We also think it's important that you should consider creating state grants and contracts for summer-only slots. We also know that in the summer space, the issues around funding are a bit different too, and so we recommend blending, braiding, and layering funding, thinking of many different ways to use your funding sources to really make sure you have resources in the summer space to help kids. So we also know that it's important to have an increased focus on summer consumer education. So what does that mean? We know that often when school closes, after school begins, or when summer starts, parents actually are not aware what's happening. They don't know where programs are. They don't know what high quality looks like. And so we find that it's helpful to help close that information gap by having a parallel consumer education strategy. So we also know that it's important to promote standards that are inclusive of specific realities to summer programs. And so we have a link actually to some summer-specific quality improvement tools. And so again, it's very parallel. They're very parallel processes of how quality looks in the after-school versus the summer space, but there are some unique features to consider in the summer. Additionally, we suggest strengthening PD, professional development, and TA to be responsive to summer needs. Again, where you may have a year-long after-school program, you then are condensed over typically 8 to 10 weeks to really make sure that you're providing enough support and TA for professionals in the summer space. So also, when building summer learning systems, NSLA has created community indicators of effective summer learning systems. And we have about six standards, we'd say, that you should think about when developing a summer learning system for quality, for supports for your programs. And so it's most important, we think, is that you have a shared vision and citywide coordination. So that means that you have an action plan that's multi-year and that everyone on that team understands what the vision is, what the mission is, and that it's multi-year. Additionally, we think it's very important to have engaged leadership from a diverse group of stakeholders. That could include the city government, it could include funders, schools, after-school programs, churches, other religious organizations as well. Data management is very huge. It's obviously a challenge in the after-school space, and even more so in the summer space. So by having your system adopt a system for data sharing, collection, and analysis across your landscape would be critical, so that all stakeholders have access to the information to make decisions. We also know it's important to have a continuous quality improvement plan that looks at how programs can move along a spectrum. So if they start one place one summer, what's your goal or plan to move them further along? How do they identify their quality improvement goals? Additionally, this is the case for anytime, anywhere, sustainable resources. So do you have an action plan that includes funding targets and strategies for scaling additionally? And the last one we think is important as well, which we mentioned in the other slide around consumer education, is having an action plan with strategies to understand demand, build awareness, and drive participation. And so we concluded a quality out-of-school time peer learning community that went from December 2016 through March 2017 and had some really interesting data that was unearthed. And so what we determined and found out that it was really important to have a diverse, as we mentioned in the prior slide, a diverse group of stakeholders that participate in these conversations, so that they're cross-sector, to have cross-sector planning teams. So we had teams that included CCDF administrators, state and after-school networks, leads from QRIS and licensing, 21st century learning centers, and youth development providers as well. And so many of these states are still working on their action plans they developed as a part of the PLC. And some states are extending their work in their cross-sector planning and gathering input from many stakeholders. And so we found that many are incorporating a CQI approach, that many are creating state program quality standards that capture the unique challenges in after-school time. States are also working in cross-sector groups on this task, and some states are identifying ways to deal with these challenges as well. And so another area that we know that states are looking at is ways to improve financing strategies and incentives for participation, like quality improvement grants, PD scholarships, bonuses, and tiered reimbursements. And so next we have the resources, but I think this is the time we're going to do more of the question and answer portion with Debbie. Thank you.
Yes, and please, if you have questions or want to dig in further, feel free to put comments in the chat box. When you receive the PowerPoint, you'll get all these great resources that have been provided. And there's a library of resources that's mentioned here. All right, so now on to Let's Talk. Well, Susan and Monica, here we go. If you were thinking about, this is one of my questions, if you were thinking about out-of-school time and the relationship to QRISs, how can we make that systems development and that quality framework more responsive to out-of-school time programs or fully engaged programs that are providing this important service? What are some of your feelings about that?
Yeah, I think I'll start on that, and Monica can add in. As I said before, the best way to make sure that the system's going to be responsive to out-of-school time is to involve the stakeholders in the planning process. And that would include the programs that are receiving CCDF subsidies, 21st century programs. A lot of great leadership is happening in state after-school networks or state after-school affiliates, representatives of youth development programs, and also I think it's going to be critical to include people that can speak about summer programs. So when we think about developing standards, we need to be thinking about how to use this as an opportunity to unify the field, because I feel that each of these sectors of out-of-school time have so much to offer. So, for example, I think that 21st century community learning centers have done a lot of work on instructional quality, on STEM, on the way in which they coordinate seamlessly really with the schools. And they have that to share in our cross-sector planning efforts. CCDF programs really know what it means to provide hours and schedules that are very family responsive. They often focus a lot on family engagement. And of course, this isn't true always across the board. There's crossover about what programs are really good about. But youth development programs have been very good in focusing on youth development outcomes and how to reach those. So if we put all those people together into one room and work on the standards that matter the most, informed by all of those sectors, I think we're going to create a much better system. The other thing I want to just take a moment to mention is that a lot of our programs are school-run or at least school-based with vendors operating inside those schools. And this often provides us with some unique opportunities for resources that we don't always tap, like professional development trainings that are shared, but there are also a lot of challenges around being in schools. And sometimes this has to do with being in a shared space, that we may end up with all of our kids, 100 kids in the cafeteria, and we're trying to figure out how to honor ratios and group sizes when we're in those spaces. So I want to just make sure that people bring in school-based providers into these conversations, because it's important both for high-quality standards and also for foundational licensing standards.
I think another challenge with sharing spaces, having been a former director who worked in this space, is that the focus and what a school looks like is so different than what after school or summer learning look like in the life of the child. And really because of different purposes or visions for the programs. So I think it's really critical, if you're using shared space or other facilities, to have good thinking as a community of practice of out-of-school time leaders about how do you negotiate that there are different, purposes and visions and really practices and best practices in play that are very different than what a typical school day looks like. I think the other challenge of sharing the space is really actually setting up a program in a space that's usable by kids after school and setting it up every day. So the school is a tremendous asset in terms of the physical space, but I think you're definitely right on target, Susan. There's a lot to negotiate and work through in sharing the space.
I'd be interested,
Monica?
Debbie, too, to see if any participants want to just weigh in about things that they've done to make sure their system is more responsive to school age. I'd love to see some people weigh in on the chat bar if they have ideas, practices.
Anything to add in coming at it from the summer learning perspective, Monica? Anything
Yes.
you'd like to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Before I came to NSLA, I ran after-school and summer programs in Baltimore City for about 13 years, and so I'm very aware of what it looks like on the ground to run programs and just how to negotiate spaces as you transition. Certainly we know that we're seeing a lot of programs that may offer maybe programs from 9 to 1 and then have a whole set of staff that come in the afternoon that's different. And so the question is, how do you make sure that you're sharing expectations and goals around young people just in that transition, even during the summer space? So I think the further out folks can start to plan and think about those pieces, the better integrated the programming will be, and the better for the young people as well. And so additionally, I think we're interested in learning more, to Susan's point around how states are incorporating the school-age group. And I'm interested in learning and hearing how states are incorporating summer quality needs into their systems as well. How are they being intentional about that? Or are they? Or is it more of just a carryover from the after-school space? And so I'm interested in if folks have any feedback or comments on how they're doing that in their system as well.
Susan, and you and Monica were both talking about this, are the programs licensed or not, and what kind of barriers that can present to QRIS participation when that's often a foundational requirement. What have you seen states do to grapple with that question? Like, how do they bring in programs that are not required to be licensed into the QRIS? Have you seen some creative ideas or solutions around that?
Well, I think there may be some states on here that may have done things that we're not aware of, but when we had our PLC and with the 23 states that were part of that, people were saying that it's a huge barrier. I know more that it's a problem. So, for example, I know of a state that's been including school age really since 2002 in its QRIS system, and yet only 13% of their programs are participating in their QRIS system. And for many of them, it's because they're license exempt. And to meet the licensing standards, like I said, in school facilities, for example, it's very difficult and costly, and so people are just opting out. So I want to just mention that there's become a new way of approaching quality improvement, and there are now 3 states that I know of that have chosen not to have their school age be part of their QRIS, but instead to develop a quality improvement system that responds to the unique needs of school age and sets standards that are critical to school age, but don't necessarily, for example, start with level 1 being a required license. So there is that alternate path that's happening now.
Are you saying that they're focusing more on the quality improvement supports and
yes,
then defining what it is versus the accountability metric, right? So they're not maybe even rating the after-school programs. They're more engaging and sharing ideas about what does the quality thresholds look like and how do we get there, right? So that's interesting.
Exactly it. And Debbie, so instead of, when you think of the letters of QRIS, quality rating improvement systems, these 3 states, instead of focusing on the rating, they're focusing on the I, the improvement part of the system. So they're adopting really a lower stakes quality improvement system. So for example, Washington State has has piloted a system, has standards. The emphasis is on a continuous quality improvement approach where programs develop their action plans of what they need to work on, what they need to improve. Then someone comes out and does an assessment and provides either a program will get a quality seal or won't get the quality seal. So it's either a yes or no. It's not a level 1, 2, 3, 4 or level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because when you look at participation numbers, there are some states that are requiring, they're mandating that school-age programs that get CCDF funding, they have to participate in the QRIS. And when you look at that and look at the numbers, they may have, I'm just going to pick one state. I'm not going to name the state, but at level 1, they have 700 programs. At level 2, they have 180 programs. And then level 3 and 4 and 5, they have a total of 3 programs. And a lot of times that's happening because, A, the programs that are license exempt are just opting out. They're saying, okay, I can't do the CCDF subsidy because I don't want to have to. I can't meet the licensing standards. The other barrier is that a lot of times our part-time staff just cannot meet the qualifications that are required for professional development. And so they can get their program up to level 2, but then to move into level 3 or 4 where the professional development requirements are higher, they're just not able to get their staff up to that level. They don't have the money, they don't have the access to PD, they don't have the PD scholarships. So that is why I think some states are starting to think of this alternative pathway.
That's interesting. Monica, I want to pause for a minute and see if you have anything to add into this qualification conversation for the summer thinking specifically.
Yeah, and I see there's another comment in the comment section. I would say that really challenges that you see in the out-of-school time space, after-school space, are really exacerbated in the summer space because, and we have been asked, and maybe we can send this along, for how states are dealing with licensing during the summer, and we can send you a resource that we developed around this. Because things like the licensing agency may change over in the summer. And certainly the standards will then change. And so I would just say that states are finding different ways to address this issue, certainly in the out-of-school time space and the after-school space, and that it's even a bit more challenging in the summer space, and that we can share a resource with you for what some states, what states are using, what agencies states use to do licensing, what some of the requirements are, to help states think about, just to see other examples of how states are thinking about this in the summer arena.
That would be great, and we'll post that along with the session. Monica, if you can send that over, that's terrific.
And Debbie, I'd just like to build on that a little bit, is that oftentimes programs, and especially CCDF programs, will say, we know we have quality challenges in the after-school portion of our year, but those challenges grow in the summer because, as Monica mentioned, not only sometimes does the license switch over in the summer, but sometimes programs are changing their space. They may move into a summer space. They may have as many as 50% new staff with precious little time to get those folks up and prepared for the summer. And then the long summer days, which while it presents a wonderful time to help to close the achievement gap by increasing summer learning, it is also hard for programs to have the time to do the planning, curriculum planning that they need. So a lot of times, especially CCDF programs, are saying quality in the summer is even more problematic, and yet there aren't as many often training and technical assistance resources provided in that summer space. A lot of times even QRIS assessments are done during the school year, but they don't go back out during the summer. And I just really urge, so happy to have Monica on, because I want to urge people to, so much is at stake in the summer. I want to urge that they don't forget about getting out into those summer programs to see what's going on.
Mm-hmm. We have a comment in the chat box about how diverse the different groups are that are providing after school and summer opportunities for children. And one of the points they made was about the incentives. What are you seeing with the types of incentives that states are using for after school and summer learning programs to focus in on quality? And do we know anything about the success levels of those strategies? Like, what are you seeing?
Okay, I'm going to say some anecdotal things we've heard. As is very typical, there is not data on which of these strategies, which of these incentive strategies are more helpful for school age. So I'm just going to caution people that some of this is anecdotal, but I just want to start out with what tends to be the most popular incentive, which is tiered reimbursement. That is, that your level of CCDF reimbursement increases as your program increases its QRIS level. Now, the problem with tiered reimbursement for school age is that many states have decided that they're not going to provide a higher rate of reimbursement until they get into the higher levels of the tiers. So you may be at level 1 and level 2 in your QRIS, but you can't move into 3 and 4 because of the PD requirements or perhaps some other challenge that you have. And so school-age programs may not be accessing tiered reimbursement very frequently. If you just think about the state example I just gave you, with only 3 states at level 3, 4, and 5, likely none of those level 1 and level 2 programs are getting tiered reimbursement. I know that programs, state planners and programs have said the quality improvement grants are really helpful. These are grants that just provide direct money to programs to be able to implement the improvements that they want to, and that is sometimes so critical for after school because otherwise they often don't have the money to put in place the changes they know are needed. On access to technical assistance, this varies greatly. It's a very, very popular support and resource. School-age programs especially love it when states are giving professional development credits for TA received, because this is a form of professional development that even the school-age staff that are part-time and may have a second and third job, they can still be accumulating PD credits because it is something that they are learning on their feet, on the spot of the program. They don't have to go to a weekend workshop or a nighttime workshop.
And we've seen a lot about being written lately, in particular, about the efficacy of embedded technical assistance and professional development, having more retention in terms of the practice of the individual and the practice in the program. So I know that a lot of states are thinking about how to actually give professional development hours for technical assistance provided by, of course, endorsed providers. But I think you're onto something with that conversation. Keep going,
right.
though. You
and
had another.
I just wanted to say one more incentive, and that is PD scholarships. This is, of course, very important because a lot of times people will say, well, I would like to go after that credential, but I really can't afford it. So PD scholarships are very helpful in our field, but it's important that states check in on their policies because we know that some states don't allow part-time staff to access those PD scholarships. And for us, we're always looking for a way to keep our part-time staff, to grow them, knowing that as they stay on, they often move up into those full-time leadership positions. But we need to be able to really support them, train them, and hold on to them long enough to have that pool that's moving up the career ladder. And I bet Monica probably has a little bit she would like to add just about sort of incentives or supports that work in the summer space because they've done a lot of quality improvement evaluation projects and evaluations.
Yes, I mean, I would, again, echo what you were sharing, Susan, about incentives that are given to staff for professional development, grants or funding. The challenge we know is, as we talked about, is the transition that happens in the summer space. And so there are your, more full-time site leaders that have maybe a different level of education, and then you have folks that may transition in and out of summer program opportunities. You may have a younger staff, college students, and so the question is, how do you make sure that they're engaged? And I think to your point, Debbie, about the embedded professional development opportunities are where we're really seeing programs thrive and best use the time they have with their staff. And so again, myself having run after school and summer programs, it's enough just to transition from after school to summer. And then to think about separately about professional development is really a whole other amount of time and energy you need to spend. Maybe you have someone that is tasked with staff professional development that happens in an embedded way. Maybe there are mentoring opportunities that you have where you have certified teachers come into classrooms and provide feedback in the immediate term to staff to help improve their practice. We're not seeing as many professional development classes that happen in the summer space. A lot of times, we know that that's when people kind of turn off and maybe get ready for the transition back to the school year. But we also know that this is really an important opportunity to give staff that support where possible, again, to get out to sites and complete and to do quality assessments of sites, to provide that feedback, because it really is a critical time with staff transitions, with new staff, with the period of time there with young people, that we really make sure that we give staff enough support to be successful in the summer space.
With this population of a lot of part-time workers or summer or college students, especially in the summer, although we use them pretty much also in after-school programs, having a strong orientation and good management practices around the supervision of the staff on the site, I think you're right, are critical elements, especially in the school-age situation. And I liked what you said, Susan, about developing this core of people who are running and overseeing the program that are almost serving the role of the on-site technical assistants, maybe in tandem with a outside support person, answering questions or supporting them to support the cadre of staff within the program. That use of the, instructional leader or director within the program to have a community of practice around supporting the staff and and really engaging with them about good, strong practices, I think is essential to a high quality out of school time program for sure. I think some of the other supports around PD and tiered reimbursement, some things like specific grants to support school age or out of school time work could be strategies, especially in high need areas or areas where you're really trying to impact the quality of the services that the children are receiving, for sure. We were talking
Debbie,
about...
I also,
yeah.
Debbie, I just want to, about the summer piece, I just want to mention that one thing Monica always reminds me about is the critical importance of supporting and resourcing intermediaries that can provide joint summer training so that every single program isn't out there all by itself trying to train up all their new staff in the summer. And that same intermediary can also provide that community of practice for the program leaders to really provide them with the support they need during this intensive summer block. And I know, it's part of the great summer model that NSLA has been doing.
I'm so glad you said that. That I think you're right. It's really certainly an economy if the school-age programs and summer learning programs can be collaborating together on the development and delivery of professional development, for sure.
And I would just add that that's kind of thank you for the shout out, Susan. But I would add that that's kind of part of the slide I shared around kind of the visioning around how to have a successful summer learning system. When building out quality supports for your programs, one of those areas is around professional development. And so if you have a group of stakeholders, you can determine what are common professional development needs for staff. Mm-hmm. We also know that it's important to have tiered professional development for where staff are on that continuum, their time that they put in. Certainly if a staff member has more time in, they maybe do more leading or mentoring for younger staff so that it's interactive and engaging. And so I definitely would say that should be an important part of your thinking as a summer system, is how to provide professional development in a way that's cost-effective but also responsive to the needs of staff on the ground.
Thank you for jumping in and sharing that. Well, in wrapping up, beginning to wrap up here, do you have, we've talked about staff, we've talked about the facilities, the programs, the challenges with staffing these programs, the asset of the core supervisor, personnel manager, the plethora of resources that you have out on the ground to share with states, and how states are really kind of rethinking their focus on the rating assessment part and working more on the quality improvement side in terms of school age. Do you see, I do have one more question about this technical assistance. Do you see states using their school age set-aside dollars or anything like that to develop refined cadres of school age technical assistance providers? Or like, how do you see, do a lot of states have an actual network?
Okay, so I see a broad range of things happening around technical assistance that is being provided by people with specific out-of-school time experience. I know that there are a number of states that have built their cadre of school-age specialists, and for some of those states, they may have, say, one school-age specialist in each region. Other states have sort of mostly early childhood TA specialists who may often be providing technical assistance to school-age programs. And we do hear sometimes some complaints from programs who say, I'm getting technical assistance from somebody who doesn't really understand our unique challenges. So we have been trying to encourage those states to work with their state after-school network, other strong city intermediaries, to first of all try to increase the number of out-of-school time specialists that they have. And if they can't afford to do that right now, at the least to work with those state after-school networks or city intermediaries to help them build the capacity and the training for the early childhood technical assistance folks, so that I know of one state, for example, that every time they offer a school-age training that's relevant for technical assistance specialists, they send out a notice about it to all of their TA specialists because they're aware so many of them come out of the early childhood space. Some states are starting to have those early childhood specialists have to shadow an out-of-school time specialist so that they get out there and they work side by side with somebody with that school-age specialization. But I would encourage people to take a look at most states are using the quality set-aside dollars to fund their technical assistance systems. That money is increasing by 1% every year. And I would encourage people to take a look at those budgets and just see if there's a way to increase the number of school-age specialists they have in their TA systems, or at least to work with somebody who's really an expert in the field to help build the capacity of their early childhood folks in this arena. I'm so glad you brought it up, Debbie, because it's such a valuable support in helping our folks move forward on quality, but it's not going to be valuable if someone is coming in who doesn't really understand the unique challenges they face. That's going to create tension in that relationship.
You know, I see this last comment in the chat box about a hybrid system, and I am just wondering if a hybrid or point system type of a setup might help the school-age program. You know, if you get over the hurdle of do you have to be licensed or not, then you come into can you meet the qualifications and at what level. But a hybrid or point-based system does allow some flexibility for programs with different visions, you know, undergirding performance standards or assets to be able to fully, you know, use those assets in describing the quality of their program for families or in the QRIS system. So I think that's really important as another avenue for states to think about what are the different ways that they'll acknowledge programs constructing quality, and pointer hybrid systems could lend some support to states being able to move in that direction with the school-age programs. Well, in closing, Monica and Susan, I'd just like to hear your final wrap-up thoughts about what we've been discussing today and any other. I know we have some great resources for folks to explore, and you've really shared some good practical suggestions and thinking and kind of what's the state of the art right now within states, and we appreciate hearing about the community of practice. What would you like to say in closing to our participants?
Monica, do you want to go first?
Sure. I would say, as I always speak to audiences around, a dedicated focus on summer to start small and intentionally. And so maybe this summer, and really we see folks often around April, May, bringing together stakeholder groups around the state to form that planning committee that we talked about, that steering committee we talked about. And so I noticed there was a question on here or a point on here from Greg Smith around how having a more diverse group of stakeholders in your QRIS will increase the probability of its success, and I would totally agree with that. And so if you have an engaged group that are talking about what's happening in school age or child care or family child care, that you bring together that group to talk about summer, that you really spend a dedicated agenda, a meeting to talk about summer specifically, and to start to outline your vision and your goals for summer. And if you've already thought about that, then the next step can be finding out what's actually happening in your state in the summer. Are there parts of the state that could use more? Is the north side of the state more heavy with programs? So there are lots of ways. I think the most important thing is to start the conversation in an intentional way around what we know are important best practices, which we shared on this webinar. And then if you can just do that this summer, that's a huge leg up. And that's certainly another point to make as I finish my point, is that I certainly am the summer program, I'm here to talk about that, but it's also important to think about how to incorporate it in your year-round quality improvement cycle. And so there are some ways to think about leveraging supports. And so we're seeing states like Denver and Colorado that are doing work where they're using the same assessors that look at programs in the after-school space, using the same ones in the summer space. So there's continuity in their relationships that are consistent, or using school year data to inform what's happening in the summer space. And then also with the coaching questions that you use, or if you have coaches, that embed questions in how summer programs will look at these issues in the after-school space. So I think there are a lot of great next steps, but I think the most important thing is just to start and to be intentional. Susan?
Thank you. That's such a great recommendation. And boy, we are on perfect timing to really, even if nothing else, states can begin to assess what is going on in our state in the summer. And we're kind of on the perfect timeline for that to be able to happen for this coming summer. Susan, what would you say in closing?
In closing, I think I have three things that I just want to really highlight. The first is that I'd like to see us think about quality improvement for all. And so not just building a QRIS system that some programs will opt into, especially, say, CCDF programs that are required to be part of QRIS, but quality improvement systems that will really reach where the children are. And I think that we can do that when we, bring together these cross-sector planning teams to really talk about what's needed and how we can share resources and blend and braid funding. The second thing I wanted to just highlight again is the critical importance of our leadership core in supporting quality and, trying to find ways that we can build their capacity to support a continuous quality improvement effort internal to the program, where they can be learning how to really be using reflective supervision practices and a coaching approach with their own staff, but also, of course, the importance of business practices, because like early childhood, we're also seeing some financial strain out there, and I think it can be improved by leaders having the money they need to work with to increase quality. And the third thing I just want to mention is finding ways and talking about concrete ways to increase access to professional development, because this is such an important driver of quality. And yet we're hearing we're hearing in so many states that after-school staff just feel like they don't have training offered when they can take it or not on the topics that they need. So really trying to assess what it is people want and need and finding a way to get it for them will help. So those would be my top three tips for system planners.
Well, gosh, I'd like to thank you both so much for sharing time today to share your expertise and resources and good thinking about this important topic. And I know that we had a lot of people who are very interested in this conversation, and again, appreciate your contribution to the lives of children after 5 years old. And thanks again, Monica and Susan. Bye-bye.